Okay, in this training video, I'm going to go a bit deeper. It's quite a short one, but I'm going to sort of discuss some of the pros and cons on where I think education is going with AI and what's going to be good and bad with it. So, to start with, we're going to look at the inevitable revolution. So, these are just four statements that I think are fundamentally true. That I just thought it'd be a nice starting point. So, the first one, AI is going to bring both good and bad changes. Now, I'm not, although I'm heavily in AI, I'm not in any way a huge AI advocate. So I think it's a piece of technology that is here to stay. So therefore, we've got a responsibility to learn how to use it to its biggest advantage and how we can integrate it in the best way for everybody. But I think it's going to bring just as much harm as it will benefit. I'm hopeful it's going to be a big benefit to education and healthcare. But I think in lots of other areas it's going to be horrendous. So it's the next technological revolution. It's bigger than the internet or the PC. Lots of people have said this now that are much cleverer than I am. And I totally agree with them. It's going to transform the world and a lot faster than anything we've ever seen before. If we think back 30 years for what the PC has done to the world over the last 30 years, and the internet is huge. This is probably going to change the world in 10 or 15 years. And it's going to be hard for a lot of people. AI's transformative role in education is inevitable, but it's also critical. I think education, having worked in it for 20 odd years now, I'm not saying I know everything, I'm UK based. It's got a lot of flaws, and teachers are amazing. They're amazing people. Everybody does their best, but when you've got a classroom of 30, it's very difficult to do the job that you want to, to personalize the learning for every student and things like that. And therefore, I think AI is going to be amazing in terms of its impact in education. And the last one is just doing nothing is not an option. I hear stories of these schools that are moving away from everything to do with technology. Everything's written on paper in the lessons, and they're almost pretending like it's not there or trying to avoid it. And that is, in my opinion, a really bad move. We've obviously got a responsibility to academically teach students, but we're also preparing them for the world they're walking into. And like it or not, AI is going to be a huge part of their future. So we've got a responsibility to teach them about it in the right way. So this is obviously Bloom's chart that you've probably all seen before. So I think in my 20 years, mastery teaching and space learning and these things come along, and they're fundamentally, in my eyes, they're attempts. People have discovered things to try and improve the educational outcomes of the students. By doing it, I'm a big believer in mastery teaching. I'm a big believer in flipped learning and things like that. I think they're great, and they do have an impact compared to conventional teaching. But I think what we're all striving for is that sort of personal tutoring, one-to-one type experience, which we're trying to come up with ideas of how to get closer to that experience when you've got a classroom of 30. And this is where I think AI is going to come in. And I've seen this in lots of sort of presentations around AI. I think anybody that's deeply involved in AI can see so clearly how this could be completely transformative to the education space. And I think this is where it's going to come in. It's going to help personalise the learning of students on a level that we've never seen before. So looking at some positives to start with before we hit the negatives. So I think personal AI tutors is a thing that's coming now. This idea of an AI study buddy, something that a student can talk to and they have a more personalised experience of the work they're working on or whatever. You could create an AI that acts like what you think a good teacher should act like in terms of a dialogue. We've also got a lot of responsibilities around how to do this, in terms of we've all seen the stories of students, especially when they're younger, they can develop unhealthy, unnatural relationships with chatbots and things like that. And we need to be very careful that it's not like that. But from a point of view of giving support and instant feedback and things, if it's done right, that could be a game changer. Differentiated pathways is a great one, where we've already seen over the last 10 years some amazing bits of technology come out where they start tailoring questions, for example. Try not to talk about a specific piece of software here, but you probably guessed the ones I'm referring to, where the student answers some questions. It starts tailoring the experience for each student individually and personalising the learning. I think this is going to be given a superpower when you throw AI in the mix as well. So where they customise the learning pathway for every student, and it starts taking away a lot of conventional ideas around people being taught in year groups and things like that. Maybe in the future they'll be able to do qualifications when they're ready, not when they hit the certain age and things like that, which is a little bit dated, if you're honest, in a lot of ways. Education as a system hasn't really moved on in the last 100 years. Multimodal learning is really exciting. So this is the idea that there's already some AIs that can see your screen when you're working on a computer. So they can look at your screen. You can have verbal dialogue with the computer effectively, but it can see what you're working on, and you can suddenly go a lot deeper into what you're working in. It could teach you a skill. It can talk, it could talk much slower to me, for example, if it's something I've never done before, but it could be talking much more advanced to the person next to me if they're comfortable with the system. You can see where this idea of multimodal learning, of not just text to text, this idea of a student voicing, verbally talking to an AI model, and the AI talking back and giving video back and things like that. I think that's going to be really powerful. The future for teachers is this idea of the AI assistant. The teaching has become a profession where people are leaving really fast, and it's because, in my opinion, of the huge amount of workload that comes with teaching. As a lot of professions moan about this as well, but I still teach now. I still have classes. I don't do as much of it as I used to, but I still got my A-level classes, and I really like teaching. I really like that part of the job. Most other parts I don't. I'm not a big fan of marking. I'm not a big fan of pretty much any, the massive inbox of emails I always have. I quite like lesson planning, but that's because I can be a bit creative with it. But again, I don't have the time to do it as well as I'd like to. So I think the future for teachers, having an AI assistant, is going to be an absolute game changer, and I'm hoping it completely transforms the profession. They can focus on what actually matters and what they're actually in the job for. There's not a lot of teachers I know that are in the job because they like having loads of emails. I think AI literacy is going to be a big part of the job. Teaching students how to use it properly. I think everybody's going to need a certain level of AI literacy. But I think teachers are going to remain completely central to this. I don't think AI is going to replace teachers in any way. They are indispensable, and it's like healthcare with doctors. You're not going to want to be educated or be diagnosed by something that isn't human, but a human with an AI superpower alongside it, helping it do its job better. That's what you're going to want. So the challenges we've got, so they're all positives. The big challenges we've got, number one, is that your academic honesty. So I can already see there's a lot of students that when they're struggling, they're resorting to AI to get work done quicker, but then they're never actually learning. So I'm visually seeing a couple of students in my head that I teach now that I feel like they might be resorting to AI because they don't want to get behind their peers, but they've fundamentally not learnt the level at which they're working now. And I think this is going to be a huge problem, and they're not being honest about it. And this is happening in every classroom all over the place. And I know this isn't a problem just for me, but this side of academic honesty and making sure people aren't using AI to bypass learning, whether they're using it to cheat or not for grades, is a different thing. That's not what I was referring to. I'm thinking of it, they're using it for the wrong reasons. And that's going to be a big problem. The overdependence is kind of linking to what I was thinking more, that there's a risk of students relying on AI, or anybody, even teachers. You think of teachers, like we are in the lucky position that I existed as a teacher 20 years before AI. So I feel like when AI generates me a lesson plan, for example, I've got the experience to say what is good and bad about the AI output, refine it and help it make me a better one. If you're new to the profession or you're a student that's using AI, you can see how they could become dependent on it and not actually made these things from scratch themselves, not actually understand what's good and bad. They've not got the experience. That's a worry. And then this last one came from a talk I heard at the Bet Show in London last year, which I thought was really interesting, is this idea we've got to maintain the difficulty. So learning isn't just about getting to the answer. It's about we've got to go through the process and go through the struggle. And the struggle is a huge part of learning. And we've got to be really careful that we maintain that, because I don't think people will learn without it, or they won't learn as deep as they do now. A couple of others. So you've got the digital divide problem. So this, again, it's not new. This is a problem just with like access to technology and infrastructure and the internet and things like that. But this is going to be made much worse by AI. So if you imagine some of these tools from the pro side, I was just talking about, you know, these assistants, teaching assistants, these learning tutors for students. When these technologies come out, and there's some that you could argue they're here now, but they are getting better and better. When these technologies come out, the people that don't have access to them, the students and the teachers that don't have access, they will be blown away by those that do. And that will create a huge divide that's scary. And that's a huge worry. You think of, for example, let's take private schools and state schools in the UK. I'm only an advocate of devices in schools if it's done in the right way, if it's managed by the school, because otherwise it can be a tool for distraction as much as it can be for learning, in my opinion. Can a lot of state schools afford to have managed devices? No, is the answer. So then you might have to go down a BYD route, or you don't have a device at all. BYD is bring your own device. Sorry if anybody didn't know what I mean. But I think it could become almost essential that students have access to a device in school for some of the AI tools that are coming, or they might not be able to learn as fast or as deeply as some of the schools that do. And that seems really bad, that we might have to force them on schools in the right way in a few years' time. Or schools will want them but can't afford them. And this could be a huge problem in the future. The ethical and privacy concerns is a big problem. So there's a lot of people using AI not understanding the data security around it. So they're using AI platforms where they're free customers, and they are sending all of their data away to America or China or wherever they're sending their data, that is training the AI models they're using. So that data potentially exists. So let's say you wrote a letter or an email to a parent, and you got an AI platform to help review it before you sent it, which is quite a common use. If you use the wrong platform, you're sending what is a piece of document that you might not have anonymized, and it might have personal information of somebody else in, and you're sending it away to potentially a different country to be part of the AI model's training in the future. That is a huge privacy problem, and that is another issue we're going to have if they're not using data safe platforms. And then obviously I've done a whole video on this, so please watch it if you're interested. But the AI errors and bias problem is massive. So that needs careful oversight and human intervention in the AI outputs to check the problems that can be caused there. So the sort of last slide, or last but one, I can't remember. So a path going forward will be, we've got to empower our people. So we've got to develop some clear, simple policies for our schools. Now, a lot of schools are doing really, really good stuff with this already. And we've got to invest in the practical ongoing teacher training. We've got to give the teachers the skills to navigate this new world, and help, let it help them in the ways it really can. The big one is the middle one. We've got to evolve our pedagogy. So we are worryingly slow in doing this. We've got some amazing brains on it, by the way. I'm not criticizing any person that's working on this. The problem is fundamentally education moves too slow, and we are in probably one of the fastest moving areas ever in AI that we've ever experienced as humans, and education just struggles to keep up with the norms in terms of its movement. And that's going to be a huge problem I can foresee, but we've got to evolve our pedagogy, our assessment practices, everything, adjust the curriculum. Are there some subjects that are even worth teaching now? I know that's quite damning, but there are the value of some of the skills we've been teaching is slowly disappearing with the way AI is going. But we've got to focus more on, so less on some of those. I'm not going to be specific on what they are, but we need to focus more on those human skills that AI can't replace. It can't replicate the creativity, the collaboration, the social emotional learning. These things are going to become more important going forwards. And then the thoughtful implementation is just this idea of creating a device strategy to ensure access to the benefits of AI. Now, I'm not completely pro AI. I'm not completely pro devices. It's got to be done in the right way, but no access to devices could be quite damaging for schools going forwards. With some of these things coming out, if they can't be part of the students' learning experience, that could be quite damaging as a school. And we need to be careful and adopt new tools and assessment models strategically, not just for the sake of the tech. We need to do it right and do it for the right reasons. And that, I think, is everything for this training video. So hopefully you found it useful. Like I say, we're going to do quite a few of these just as little topics to talk about AI. So please check out the other ones if you like this one. Thank you.